witches. So when I get stressed out, I do two things. I bake and I craft. And this past weekend and week has been really stressful for me, so I've been doing both. And you'll see the stuff I've baked in the upcoming Kitchen Witch Wednesday blog post. But I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what I'm working on. I am working on my, I guess you can call them books of shadows, or grimoires, or spell books, or magical journals. And that's right, multiples. I didn't want to talk about it, but for the sake of transparency, and for the fact that I don't believe that I'm the only witch going through this. I've been practicing witchcraft. We're coming up on 2 decades, and I have struggled with keeping a book of shadows, and I'm a little embarrassed about it. I feel like this is something that I should have already figured out, However, looking back, I'm going to have a little bit of compassion with myself. One thing, I switched paths a couple times in my practice. And in doing so, it kind of changed up how I do everything. Not, on one hand, it didn't change anything, on another hand, it did. And it definitely changed how I keep a book of shadows, because my original book of shadows was based on Wicca and kind of like a personalized copy of a combined Gardnerian and Corellian concept. So, and again, I think like a lot of new witches, it was mostly copy and paste. It wasn't very personal. It was mostly just me recording charts and lists and lessons out of other books and out of my online studies and whatnot. And the other issue is one I think that a lot of witches can relate to, especially if you're solitary or you started out on your own. And the reason for this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately, especially as I'm working on my own books of shadows, is if you're starting out on your own and you don't really have a mentor or a guide, or even if you do, but they're not handing over their magical journals or books of shadows to you, you might not know what to put in one. And even those books and infographics and websites and all that other stuff talking about what to put in your book of shadows, they all kind of say the same thing. And most of them are based on published books of shadows, like the Gardnerian, like the Alexandrian, like Lady Sheba, I think is the big one that was kind of one of the first ones to come out, so on and so forth. And those are, I think what we get confused about is that those are Wicca 101 books and Witchcraft 101 books, more than they are books of shadows. They're teaching books of shadows. So we think that our book of shadows, because that's the only ones we have to go off of, many of us, should look like that. However, we end up just essentially copying Wicca and Witchcraft 101 books into a journal, and that's not necessarily something that's going to help us. In fact, most of the witches I've spoken to over the years, and then I've watched videos about books of shadows and been in forum comments and stuff like that, we get overwhelmed because we're essentially copying and pasting lesson materials into our books of shadows, and we never get to a point where we're putting in our own stuff. Or when we do, by that point we're so burnt out on writing our books of shadows because we've been copying and pasting and writing down charts and graphs and all this other stuff, or just printing it out and filling it in, and then we are left with like a third of a journal to keep our stuff in. And I'm laughing because it's just, it's a little frustrating looking back on that. Like, why did I do that? But I did that because that's what the books of shadows I've seen had. And then I would always daydream, like I would love a book of shadows that looked like the ones I had seen in fiction. Um, Three come to mind immediately, and that's the Practical Magic Book of Shadows. I know witchcraft and what's on TV and what's in movies, of course, is not the same. But very few witches you talk to don't covet that Book of Shadows, that spell book. It was beautiful, beautiful. And I've seen companies that make them and sell them, and man, that's a pretty penny. Another one is the Charmed Book of Shadows. That huge tome passed down generations, like the concept of it. I may not be a huge fan of how some of the, artwork is in it, but the idea of it being passed down, I think, is what really got to me. Plus, it's this huge leather, book. And I'm a sucker for big books. And then the personal books of shadows from, I think it's called The Secret Circle. What was that TV show? I'm asking my phone with this recorded video, like y'all can tell me. I think it's called The Secret Circle with Cassie and the other teenagers. I don't know. It was fun to watch. But they all had personal books of shadows, which was a little bit closer to what, witches have. They have their parents. But even those were like little journals, and they would copy for each other, like the stuff that they shared in their coven or their circle. And then, my arm's getting tired. And then, of course, their own stuff. So that was probably the closest thing I could think of as like a personal thing, but it was little, and so it didn't appeal to the huge tome and almost scrapbooky art journal feel of the Practical Magic Book of Shadows or the Charmed Book of Shadows, but it actually was more realistic considering. So I had said earlier that I'd struggled with my Book of Shadows. I had books of shadows that were pretty much copy-paste print, stuff I've learned online, stuff I've learned in books, and it wasn't doing me any good, because if I wanted that information, I'd rather just go to the original source than my very messy Book of Shadows. Plus, it was so big, I couldn't lug it around. Of course, when I was in the broom closet, I definitely couldn't do anything with it. And I had issues with it. Later on, I was creating books of shadows, and then I just got so overwhelmed by wanting to make it perfect, but also hating 3 ring binders. I had not learned about scrapbooks and stuff like that yet. Then I got pregnant, and my husband is a practicing witch as well, really loved the idea of having a family book of shadows, and talked about creating one of those that would have been, had pockets and tags like a scrapbook or a mixed media book, and share that with our child. And so I started on that. That was an undertaking, and it still has not gone anywhere. It was such work because I don't know if any of y'all scrapbook or any of y'all get that stuff together, but especially if you already have a ton of stuff that you want to go in it, page after page after page. By the time I started getting the very basics together into pages and then I put it in a book, I had a full scrapbook. It was this big. And I was like, this is not gonna work. Now, maybe if I decided to create like a teaching resource, say my son decides he wants to become a witch and he wants to learn the basics of witchcraft, I might do something like that with him, but by that point he'll probably be too old for something like that and just want something basic. So I was like, Mom, this is not gonna work. It's fun, it's creative, I love it, but it just was not working. In fact, it's in storage now. It's in a box that's this big, and it's just, I don't even know what to do with it. I might find out what to do with it later, at a later date, but right now I have no clue. So, been thinking lately, I was like, I've got to figure out a system where I can keep up with my magical bookkeeping and record keeping that will work. That'll be something I actually keep up with and use. And it wasn't until I started keeping a bullet journal, and I started doing that in October of last year, so that's 2017, that I was like, oh, love this. And then I started thinking about, like, all right, so what would I want a Book of Shadows to do for me? Well, that's when things got a little bit weird, because I had a hard time narrowing it down. And then finally I figured out I need 3 books. Sorry about my nails. I need to redo them. Crappy nail polish. Anyway, I need 3 books. I need my bullet journal, which is my daily stuff. So that's my daily tarot readings. That's my client info. I need to read this for the client, notes about that client, and so on. It has my astrology input. It's got if I'm keeping up with a spell, all that goes into my bullet journal. So here's my bullet journal. You know what? Here, let me do this. Oh no, it won't let me flip it around. All right, sorry guys. I'll just hold it up. I thought it was gonna let me flip it around. So anyway, here's my bullet journal currently. I've been through 3 already, and I just started last October. So that's less than a year, and I've already gone through 3. But anyway, I write a lot. So that's my bullet journal. I'm gonna do a different video that goes through my bullet journal just to show you all the witchy stuff I put in it. That's daily. That's my daily stuff. So I don't need to have my daily journaling in a Book of Shadows because I have my bullet journal for that. Plus, if I put daily journaling in a Book of Shadows, it's gonna be huge. Absolutely huge, because like I said, I've been through 3 of these already. And I can't imagine keeping all that information in one book. That'd be huge, and there's just no way. Also, if I included meditation notes, astrology notes, dream journaling, those 3 things are actually in apps on my phone. That's not even in my bullet journal, mostly. So yeah, that'd be huge. All right. So I decided I would have 2 magical books on top of my bullet journal. So my bullet journal has all the daily stuff. Then I need something I can easily grab to put spells, tarot spreads, any major astrological event that I'm going through, and stuff like that. Big stuff that would span over several bullet journals or several months or whatever. And so then I was like, well, that could be my magical journal. That could be something I can still access and use continuously, personal, as I go through, personal stuff that's just me. It's not necessarily related to my husband's practice. It's not necessarily related to what I want to teach my son. It's just stuff for me. And so I created my magical notebook, and I hate that I can't turn this around. So I'm going to try and do it this way. All right. Here's my magical notebook. Sorry for the box behind it. Isn't that pretty? So I worked on that, and it was a journal that was gifted to me, and I redid the cover with some recycled bits and charms and stuff I already had. I made sure I used charms and buttons for spirit guides that I have and so on. And then I decorated the inside of it. And I'll do a journal post about this book because I put a ton in it. And so this is going to include, this year I'm going through the beginning of my Saturn return. So I've got notes about my Saturn return, about the astrology reading that I got for it. I've got notes about some thoughts I'm having about the Tower card in tarot, because that's one of my cards for the year. So that's like a full year-long thing, my processing of it. I also have a section about my experiences with spirits and deities. That's UPG, or unverified personal gnosis. So stuff that I wouldn't find in a book about Norse mythology, for example. I see no reason for me to copy down myths from a book when I've had experiences of my own if I want to look up the myth, I'll just go look up the myth out of one of my mythology books. This is entirely just for my experiences with them. And then I have my section on spells, rituals, and recipes. And of course I include recipes because I do kitchen witchcraft. Now, there will be some overlap between my bullet journal and my magical notebook. Especially if I do a spell that's going to take time, I can mark my daily working or anything that comes up for me from that spell, a daily practice, in my bullet journal. And then once that spell has culminated and I've seen the effects of it, I'll take it from my bullet journal over to my magical notebook and work on it there. Just so I can go back to it, make notes, whatever. Now, then there's going to be overlap from my magical notebook, which I will be using. Let's say I use it on a weekly or even a monthly basis. Then there's going to be oh my gosh, the lighting is terrible. All right, there we go. Then there will be the family grimoire or book of shadows. And this is going to be the book that I work on with my husband, and that we will, if my son decides to follow in our footsteps, that we will be passing on to him and using to teach him. My husband works in wood. He loves carving wood, making things out of wood, and so he made this gorgeous piece. And as you can see, it's blank right now. It's got some circles drawn on it. I'm going to be doing some wood burning on it. And that cord will not be what holds it together. We're getting something nicer for that. But that's something, that's a work in progress. Beautiful piece. And we can keep our joint information together, our astrology charts, rituals we've done together, like our hand fasting, our my son's naming ritual on his first birthday. What else? Different stuff like that. So we'll keep all that in the family book of shadows. And we're also adding in some genealogy work, since we both are really interested in ancestry work and so forth. So that will all go in there. I'm decorating it. This may not even be the final piece for it, because there's some dings on the wood that we're not sure if we want to keep for character, so on and so forth. Another really fun thing is, I don't know if you saw that, but that cord means the pages are removable. So perfectionist me can go through and rearrange, add pages, take out pages, and so on. So that's fabulous. We can also print out pages. My husband and I both have horrible handwriting. And supposedly it makes us creative and artistic. And all I know is we can't always read our own handwriting, much less expect other people to read it. So typing up pages in a really pretty font is preferred. So that's what we've got going on. I will probably post blog posts on both creations. My magical journal will be on the blog with, featuring each of the artsy pages I created for it. And then once I have our family book of shadows wood burned and decorated how I like, I will post that on the blog as well. So that's what's been going on with me. This is what I do to relieve stress, which is really funny because I get a little stressed out about it, but it's a good stress versus dwelling in a mood about stuff that I can't control at the moment. So that's what's up. Let me know, how do you keep a book of shadows? What's your method and system of magical record keeping? I am really into this right now. I've been watching a few videos on it. I would love to know what you do. How do you keep it together? Because I'm still figuring it out for myself. And like I said, I've been doing this for a while. It's not like I'm new, and that it's a little embarrassing to even say, hey, I don't have my shit together about this, but it's difficult. This is not, the easiest thing to keep up with. And I feel like beyond the basic witchcraft and Wicca 101, I've not really seen much talk about how we keep our magical books and magical bookkeeping, I suppose you can call it. I've even been thinking about doing a virtual one with videos of how I do my spells and the like, so that if I ever, if I have to teach my son, or heaven forbid, I'm not here to teach him certain things, or, something for even great-grandkids. Here's your crazy great-grandmother who is a witch, and here's the stuff that she did, and here's a video of it. Or if I ever took on a student, which is not likely, but my husband used to take on students, and this would have been a great teaching tool for him. So, just different things I've been thinking about, but I don't even know how I would be able to cross-reference video info and virtual Book of Shadows with a physical one. Anyway, I would love to know your thoughts. I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of Book of Shadows and grimoire shenanigans you get up to. I really want to see it, so comment, link, video response, something. I want to see it. Alright, thank you all for watching.